We all have those stories early in our childhood that kind of define a moment that we can remember like it was yesterday. And generally, they're not for the best. And today, I want to tell you a story about middle school. It was sixth grade. And I was standing outside the classroom waiting to go into social studies. And there were two bullies, Brandon and Brian. Brandon and Brian both were known as bullies. They were both essentially became high school dropouts, but not in sixth grade. In sixth grade, they were still tormentors in different kids' lives, and one of those kids' lives was me. Now, I remember this wasn't like the first incident. This was just the one where it became physical. And I remember waiting outside in line, lining up against the hall, and I remember doing nothing but other than being me and getting punched in the gut. I remember having the wind knocked out of me. I remember, again, like it was yesterday, having to suck it up because I did not have the courage to speak up back then. I did not have the courage to use my voice to represent that evil doesn't win and that good should win. I just swallowed it down, which probably created a lot of different mindsets that took me years into the future to unpack of you don't just swallow it down when you are hurting. You don't just swallow it down when you've been punched in the gut. Now, there are times when you get hit, you get knocked down, you get back up. But in this case, bullying is one of those that kind of creates those scars that we don't really know how to grow from. They create those moments that become kind of this cement mentally that we feel a little bit stuck in. I remember walking into that classroom and trying to sit in social studies, knowing my stomach hurt, knowing that I didn't have the courage to say anything and trying to catch my breath and really just having this anger brew up inside me towards Brian and Brandon and not being able to do anything about it. I remember this moment kind of cemented how I would behave between 6th grade and 12th grade because this just wasn't the only moment that someone would come into my life and not necessarily punch me in the gut, but metaphorically punch me in the gut, whether it be through words, whether it be through rejection, telling me I couldn't do something, or just making fun of me. I was often the kid that people were making fun of, that they would always try to pull a prank on, or that they always thought that I could be the butt of their jokes. And that kind of defined my early existence, but it was cemented that 6th grade day that I got punched in the gut. Because when I got punched in the gut, there was a lesson that I learned there. Not a good one. A lesson that you just have to swallow it down, that there's not this process to go through these things. There's not this process or belief process to reframe that, to grow through it, to realize it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. And so many of the times between that 6th grade, even times in boot camp, I would be bullied again in boot camp because the same kind of kids would go to the Marine Corps and they would get put into boot camp. And well, in the beginning of those phases, they are trying to ignore what the drill instructor says. They are not used to following directions. They've never followed directions well most of their life. And those guys are seeing me as a target because I was a target before they went into the Marine Corps. And that moment really kind of solidified. Again, going back to that time I was punched in the gut, really was the first and honestly the only time I've been punched in the gut. Because I've also, since then, never been in a fight. There was a defensive nature that was kind of took out of me way back in the beginning in that 6th grade moment, that I don't get to defend who I am. I don't get to defend what's right. I don't get to grow through what I believe to be right. I don't get to say what I want or what I believe to be true and what is right. And so something that I often hold on to, way too often, is that still same belief that I can't stand up and take a side, that my voice doesn't matter. Well, I mean, doing this episode and this recording and sharing this whole story because I want you to see the visibility in how a simple moment can create an entire multiple decade path of choice. Because most of the time, I would say I don't get into fights, I don't get into altercations because I still remember what it's like to get punched in the gut, and I get remembering what it was like to not have the courage to stand up and fight. Fight is not something I've ever had to experience in my life. I've never been in a fist altercation trying to go blow to blow and get punched in the face. I've never been punched in the face. The closest is pugil sticks in boot camp. In that case, I lost as well very quickly. There was no do or die and bugle sticks for me in boot camp. And this moment of not being in a fight, not knowing how to fight, but in the context not of actually physical altercation, what I'm talking about here is fighting for who you are on the inside, standing up for who you are on the inside, believing that you are not defined by the events of your past. You're defined who you are on the inside. But what most men have had taken out of them, like me, in some different way, is that ability to exercise, fight for who they are. Because they didn't have belief in who they are in the very beginning, and they didn't have the courage to stand up for who they are in the beginning. Now, partially I'm also sharing this because this isn't a story that I've ever shared publicly. So this story helping get out in the open, me putting words to it, is applying the same advice that I tell all of you on this podcast, that you need to exercise the things that are holding you back. You need to let them go, because the more times you let them go, the less power they'll have over you. So I'm letting this go, sharing it with you to inspire maybe you to share something back and to realize that these moments early on in our life can have real impact. And I ask you today, where has life taken the fight out of you? Where have you lost the ability to fight for what you really want? To not fight in the physical altercations, but to fight and go metaphorically fist for what you really want in life. Because this is something that most men suffer from, because we've been demasculated to the point where we don't get to have our voice, and we've been told, like me, that me standing up for myself is wrong. That me standing up and taking a side and fighting for what I believe to be right is not something that I have a right to do. But as I've learned through this process of growing through what I'm growing through, that is a big, giant line of bullshit. Bullshit in the context of I have a right to be me. I have a right to use my voice, to exercise it, to be someone that can stand up and fight for dads that maybe don't have the insights to fight for themselves, to help them understand who they are. One of the main things that I do in the coaching with dads that I coach is help them understand where that flame comes from, who helped insert the CO2 and extinguish it, to limit its ability to grow, turn off the CO2 and turn on the oxygen and get that furnace roaring again, to get that fire and fight back into your life where you are fighting every goddamn day to be the person that you were meant to be, to rise up past the person that metaphorically punched you in the gut, like me. Maybe you didn't get punched in the gut, whatever it was for you, to rise up and be the phoenix of that problem, that moment, to rise up and be more than that moment that you were punched in the gut. And I'll be back again with you guys tomorrow.